Welcome to Ask Dr. Change. I'm Dr. Linda Ackerman Anderson. I'm happy to have you join me today to explore how to seriously up-level your leadership and consulting to transformational changes, all through conscious change leadership. Welcome. Today is a very special episode with me having the great opportunity to interview Robert Jake Jacobs, who is the creator, the originator of real-time strategic change when we were just birthing the whole industry of large systems change. And so Jake is here with me today to talk about your history and your life and your work, and I'm thrilled to have you here. I think Jake and I have known each other, it's at least 30 years.
Yes.
So, Jake, tell us who you are.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Change, for having me on the podcast. I appreciate that. And that is a big question. Who am I? I was thinking, one of the things that probably is at the core of me, which figures into my work as well, is optimism. So I'm an optimist. I got that from my father. He actually was a member of a card-carrying member of a club called the Optimist Club when I was growing up. They did good works in the community, and so one of the things is that I'm a glass half full guy, and I think that really helps me in working with organizations and with leaders. But possibilities, potential, vision, what might be, and asking that question with the expectation that better is coming. Right. So the expectation is better is coming. And I think that my clients really benefit from that because it's affirming.
Absolutely.
I had a mentor, Kathy Dannemiller, who you knew as well, I think, Linda.
Yes.
And God rest her soul. And she taught me a lot about this field when I first got into it. And a lot of it was based in work that Ron Leppett had done around preferred futuring. And that also is looking at what do I want in the future and then how do I get there. I think creativity is another piece of who I am, that I love innovation and I love discovering new things, learning new things, applying new things in terms of my work in the world. And I also love to cook, Linda.
Yes.
Just the other night for my whole family, made chicken Parmesan and eggplant Parmesan from scratch. So that was a good meal with some bruschetta as well.
All right. I love it. After my own heart. Fabulous. So, Jake, I don't want to let you go without some professional credentialing because you have authored or co-authored at least 8 books, one of them on real-time strategic change. You're currently working at the Learning Circle, directing a whole consulting practice there. So I just want people to know you have a deep, deep history in actually doing large systems change, team change, transformational change. You were there when we were all really crafting what is this field about.
Yeah. And when you and Dean were doing the large group work and a lot of the things that you're doing now in Houston with the police that you told me about, that's I've worked with police in Charleston and Louisville, and so we share some common bonds there. And of course, going back to, and I don't mind dating myself at this point, but I think the late 80s is when mid to late 80s plugged into all of the large-scale change work that Kathy and her colleagues were doing.
So, Jake, you said a little bit about coming into this work. I'd like to hear more about what brought you into the change and the leadership and the organizational work.
Yeah, I've got a fun story about this, Linda, that I had a great academic mentor when I was at the University of Michigan, and I basically was doing independent study work in the psychology department. In fact, at one point, asked them for funding that I would be able to get to go observe behavior in bars. I was doing a thesis on bars in a college town, and I went to the psychology department and I said, if I just sit there and I look at people, because I said how much foam is supposed to be on a beer was a level of organization commitment. It's supposed to have 2 inches. And I said, if I go into these bars and I just sit there and watch people pouring beers, it's going to be odd. They're going to wonder what I'm doing. And so I went in and I said, can I have money to buy beer so that I could drink it while I'm watching and counting how well people are behaving? And they tossed me out of my ear. But one of the my first consulting job was actually at a bar that I was tending at in college called Dooley's, and I was going to do interviews and a couple of meetings, something small. And what I found was the owner of the bar said to me, "My first contract, Linda, do whatever you want, Jacobs, just don't F anything up." And he didn't use the letter F. So So I had a very when I was 21, my consulting career started. It's actually all I've ever done, and I had an internship with Kathy and her crew, and they were working on a global change effort at Ford at the time around participative management, and I stepped right into that at 22 when I graduated, and so consulting has been all that I've done.
Awesome. Awesome. And so, how did that experience lead you to shaping real time strategic change?
Yeah, so I had a master's thesis. I went to Pepperdine and got my master's in OD. And my thesis that I wrote up was I called it cathedral building after that story of, coming up on a gentleman, with the stone. What are you doing? And I'm cutting a stone and I'm building a wall. And the third person says, I'm building a cathedral. And so I documented the process that we were using at Ford as part of what my thesis was. We were working at Corning and Marriott, and each of these got a different section. And so I documented it. And then as we extended that over time from large scale change to real time strategic change, I identified some core underlying principles that you could live by, and it got us out of what I call the event only game. So if all you can do is these large groups, you go large group session to large group session. And Kathy used to say there was a half-life about 6 months that an organization knowledge and insight and collaboration, all these things could stick, and then you'd need to bring people back together. So my question was, what if you didn't? And I actually had a client at Unical that they had an unwritten rule that you couldn't gather more than 40 people at a time for a meeting. And so it sort of felt like I had one arm tied behind my back. It was unusual. So the principles really help open the door to, if you're going to be thinking and acting as if the future were now, if you're going to be engaging and including people, if you're going to be doing preferred futuring work, these core principles say you're doing good real-time strategic change work if you're living those principles. And even in a one-on-one conversation, I can be doing large-scale change work. I don't need 500 people in a room, but that one-on-one conversation with those principles in line makes it possible to do RTSC work.
Yes, fabulous, fabulous. So then, time warping to now, how would you define success in what you're doing now?
Yeah, so now, and you mentioned in the intro that I've joined Leadership Circle, which is an organization that's focused on leaders and their development and building consciousness in the work that they do in their organizations. And there's an instrument and assessment that goes along with it. But the organization of Leadership Circle is focused on individuals and teams primarily, secondarily on systems. the work that I've done in my career around RTSC is primarily focused on systems and secondarily focused on individuals and teams, right? So neither ignores the other, but when you put them together, you get a very powerful combination. And so for me, success is bridging the gap between these two methodologies, between these two approaches, and bringing what I call our A game at that individual and team level and our A game at the systems level.
Awesome. Awesome. And so what you're stepping into a little bit is an area that's near and dear to our work in terms of consciousness of leaders and consultants. How do you see the change field needing to progress? What's next? What are the cutting edges that you see for this field?
Yeah, I had a very interesting conversation that I've been part of just the last few days in our organization around artificial intelligence. And one of the things that I've done with Chat GTP is created something called Chat RTSC.
Ah,
And I've got a knowledge file of everything that I've written and published and designs, and all of these things are in a knowledge file. And you can go in and you can ask questions. Uh, yeah, I'm a leader and I need to explain to my team what real time strategic change is. How do I do that? And then the AI gives you a stunningly good response. So there's this conversation in our organization right now about, well, what is it that AI can't do? Uh, it can't have deep insight or collective sense making or um, intuition, right? And all of these things that they say that AI can't do. And it was interesting to me because I'm on a internal group called working on the future of work. And instead of asking what can't AI do, I'm asking what can AI do. And in fact, I went into the AI interface and typed in what research is there that supports AI improving the work of leadership in the world. And of course, it gave me a whole page of research from consulting firms and professors and so forth about the role that AI plays. So one of the things that I think is really important is continuing to embrace these new technologies, to take it again from this perspective of what can we learn from them? What can they add value in? How can they shape our thinking? And just with what I got back in that question I typed in, it was really interesting because it spurs a deeper dialogue, a more informed dialogue, because it pulls this information from so many places that you just wouldn't have. And instead of just an opinion, which those are good, right? But a more informed opinion, I think is even better.
absolutely. Beautiful. Well, you're motivating to me, having actually done that. Dean and I are talking about putting all the conscious change leadership work into the AI space for exactly the same purposes. So thanks for cutting the way there. That's great. Awesome. Based upon all of that and the insight that you just shared, what guidance do you have for leaders at this point, given our reality that we're living in?
One of the things that I would say, Linda, and this is paradoxical because we're just talking about artificial intelligence and the cutting edge. And I'm going to go back to an article that you know well, I'm sure, and Dean does, that Herb Shepard wrote, right? Rules of thumb for change agents. And there's one of the rules of thumb that he offers that I believe in quite deeply is called light many fires. And so lighting many fires in an RTSC world, there's short learning loops. So rather than these massive projects that take years to pay off and you don't know whether they're going to work or not, it's about how fast can we make something happen? How can we think and act as if the future were now, and then start changing our behavior immediately? And so when I think of advice to leaders, this light many fires says, look, get out there and start trying things. This reticence or fear or just holding back from getting out into the world and experimenting and finding new and better ways to do things, sharing those with your colleagues, uh, making that part of the everyday conversation, right? What are you trying? What are your experiments that you have underway right now? All of that, I think, is a good counsel for leaders or for any change agent that we're talking about.
Absolutely. I'm reminded years ago, a motto at Intel was go ugly early. And the purpose was get out there, do something, and learn from it, but don't sit. you know? Yeah. So that's awesome. And what's interesting is the conflict, the challenge in these days of fear and risk mitigation. The stakes are high. And so that counterpoint with go out there and do something, light many fires, is a very interesting challenge that for us opens the door to mindset. What is a leader's or leadership team's or a consultant's mindset about taking risks and trying something new? And how do you create the conditions where that's safe? You're not going to get attacked or punished for having tried something to cut some new territory. Really, it's a powerful guidance.
Yeah, and the other thing, Linda, that I would say, just one other kind of counsel, because I had a client that was hammering on accountability in their organization, right? Like any which way they could get accountability built in. Even signs were going up in elevators and wherever you turned, this was it. And they were getting less and less accountability in the organization. The harder they pushed, right, the less they got. And there's a polarity based on work that I learned from my buddy Barry Johnson on accountability and support. And so what you really need is this support to be able to help people fulfill their accountabilities. So one other guidance that I'll give you, because what support looks like needs to, I think, be defined by the people getting the support. So as a leader, I don't know what support you need, Linda. I need to ask you. And so having that conversation between leaders and their organizations, there was, when I was growing up, there was a band, maybe you caught part of it. REO Speedwagon was the band. And they had, you know that one? No. They had a song, 157 Riverside Avenue, and it was a guitar riff that the guy did. But what they said was, do you know how to speak to a guitar? Right? And they said, you got to speak to them in their own language. And so he goes on a riff back and forth. And when you're a leader, you've got to learn to speak in the language of the people that you're leading. It's not fair, or it's not going to be effective to say, look, you come and understand what I'm saying from my language as a leader. I've got to come and meet you where you are and learn from you, and then take that and provide support from that place, as opposed to expecting people in the organization to make sense of your worldview.
Yeah, that's fabulous. It brings to mind the importance of relationship, because it really is foundational for leaders to have relationship with the folks that they're influencing, they're asking work of, that they're asking to contribute. So it's just not just delegate and announce. It really is, from what you're saying, having relationship, which is also a human capability that in many organizations is sorely missing these days, whether it's, because of fear, or bad culture, or history, but building that awareness and consciousness around deep relationship is really important to do what you're saying.
Yeah, and the work that you and Dean have done for years, it's founded in the same deep wisdom around relationship and connection, and humanity. And I think we all yearn for that connection. And if we can find it where we work, amazing things become possible.
Absolutely. Creating that level of safety in the culture, relatedness in the culture can only produce greater contribution. And that's our experience over and over and over again, and all the work required to actually create that. But awareness has to come first to leaders to support what's possible if we're able to operate individually, as teams, and as a whole organization at a much deeper level of relatedness. Really, really important. How about for consultants? You've been a consultant forever. Guidance for consultants at this point?
One thing I would say that I found really helpful through the years in any situation in which I'm consulting is meeting my clients where they are. Right. So in the Leadership Circle organization, we have this Leadership Circle profile. And the first thing that we do is it's a 360. And so we gather data from people, bosses, subordinates, peers, and be able to then understand where is this leader in their journey, right? In their story around moving into being the best that they can be. And so being able to tap into that information and join that person on their journey. Kathy used to say that there was something she called consultative leadership. And consultative leadership gave me, gives you, gives the listeners permission to step out and be part of a team, be part of that partnership so that you can decide, where are we going to go? How are we going to get there? What do you need from me? What do I need from you? And so that whole notion of working with your clients, partnering with them, starting where they are, uh, listening to their needs and their expectations, and building that kind of relationship that we talked about between leaders in the organization. It's the same thing between leaders and consultants, that the deeper that relationship, the more profound that connection that we have with people, the bigger the possibility of what we can create together.
Beautiful, beautiful. What comes to mind in everything that you've done, everything that we've done, is inquiring, is asking, is opening the question to listen. And so many consultants go in with I've got to have the answer. I have to give advice. I have to be seen as valuable. That's what they're paying me for, which shuts down the part of the brain that is thoroughly, deeply open to be curious, to inquire about what's possible. And I hear that in what you're saying, both for leaders with their work, with the workforce, and consultants with their clients, is to truly step into listening and inquiring and being curious, as opposed to having to have the answer.
I mean, one of the great gifts that I got, Linda, is when I started in this field, I said I was 22 years old, and I was going in to meetings at Ford with executives. I mean, division general managers of 30,000 member organizations. And I went in, and they used to wind me up and push me into these meetings. And I would sit down, and I would just ask the question that came to me. I mean, I was curious. I was wondering, and I didn't know much. And so I asked these questions. And of course, some of them were taboo questions you're not supposed to be asking. Some of them were, just simple, basic, could you say more? So I think those 4 words, another thing that I would say is a great guide for me in my work is, could you say more? 4 words, and and then shut up, right? And start taking mental notes about it. But people yearn to be heard. They yearn to be listened to. There's a lot of inherent wisdom in an organization just by what people know on a daily basis. And so if you're listening for more, creating a space, opening a door, uh, is a wealth of information that becomes available to you.
Yeah. You know what's wonderful about what you're saying? This is something I've been thinking about and writing and speaking about, and that is asking a question, getting a response, and helping people to understand what they actually value and believe. And so many people just act out of rote, act out of habit, act out of what they hear on TV, as opposed to truly paying attention. What am I saying here? What do I actually believe? What's the impact of it? That has become, I look at that in our, political environment right now. What are you actually thinking about what you're saying and how you're showing up? It just seems to be such an important capability in this day and age.
Yeah, well, with what you're saying, Linda, when people answer that first question, asking a second and a third just takes you deeper and deeper into relationship, into information, into insight. And there are things you could ask me. You're asking me a question, and I'm responding, and we're having a conversation and a dialogue, and you're going deeper with your own perspective on that, and I'm reflecting back mine. And so this is where the magic happens, is taking the time to be able to have those meaningful conversations. And I find that when I'm with leadership teams, when I'm working with client systems, we spend time in what we call design teams, which is something that you use as well. And so in those design teams, building a common database, building a common understanding that includes, you talk about our political climate, right? It's like, well, we're not including the whole picture. We're taking our side and their side, and then we're making sure that they don't cross. Well, in those design teams, you've got to listen to be able to understand. Kathy used to say, see the world through the eyes of another.
Yeah, absolutely. Walk in the other shoes for sure. So I want to ask you, given the work that you have done and the work that you're doing now, what are the biggest challenges? What are the holdups? What are the mountains yet to be climbed?
Yeah, so I can answer that very personally, because the work that I'm doing at Leadership Circle to put our TSC and LCP, or the Leadership Circle profile, together, uh, it's a challenge, right? It's a challenge because you have, I don't want to, well, I'll say it, right? So they're sort of silos. You've got a systems work and you've got individual and team work. And so how you bring those together, it's not that one's not doing the other, right? Everybody's working on all aspects of the system, but primarily, where are you paying attention? Where is your energy? Where is your effort going? And so being able to say, look, how do we pull this together in a unique way that we can bring it to our clients and give them the opportunity to cut new ground, to find new ways forward for themselves and for their organizations, that really leverages the best that we've got to offer at that individual and team level and at that systems level. And it, it's a challenge. I took it on. I thought, this is going to improve my work, the value that I offer to clients, by having that emphasis on leadership and leadership conscious leadership and development of that, um, furthering it, all of that is part of what I'm very deep into these days, personally, making sense of and figuring out how to bring it into the world in a way that's replicable, that's predictable. One of the things about the leadership circle profile is it's hugely well researched. And the correlations that they have to effective organization performance on a number of different dimensions against this instrument are really, really high. So being able to have that level of predictability when you go in with an assessment, it's like having that level of predictability when we go in to do change work.
Yeah, awesome. Well, you've kind of stepped into my last question for you, and that is what's next for you. So it sounds like you're already in it with this, if you want to say more about that. And then let's say, beyond your success in doing this, what else is up for you in your life?
Yeah, I uh, I have always been driven by impact. And I happen to have been raised in the Jewish faith, and I was 7 years old in Sunday school, and the rabbi was up on the altar in the synagogue, and uh, he said something that I remember to this day. So, 50 plus years later. And he said, when you die and you go to meet God, God will not ask you why you were not as great as Abraham. And God will not ask you why you were not as great as Moses. God will have one question for you. And were you as great as you could be? Did, did you make your contribution? Did you step up and figure out ways through when it was tough, when it was challenging, when you didn't know which way to go? So yes, in work, most specifically, I have this challenge as a change and transformation practice leader at Leadership Circle to figure out how do I integrate these and not like a bolt on,
Right. No.
not just like add to, but how do we fully integrate this in a way that's most powerful for clients and organizations? And then this question of what's up for me in life. Well, let's see. On top of the chicken parmesan and eggplant parmesan, uh, there, I mean, it's a funny metaphor because there's many more recipes to be cooked, many more dishes to be served, and I think that really seeing what is possible, like I said around AI or other things, when there's something new, how can we move towards it, right? Instead of away from it, instead of that fear or that reticence, what's the next thing around the corner? Well, I think that, yeah, technology is going to play a big role. And a lot of people talk about AI and the implications of it and, it taking on human characteristics and its consciousness and so forth. And I think uh, we've got to tackle those kind of things head on. We've got to move towards them and into them and start experimenting. So light many fires. The things that we've talked about today. That fits for me as well. And so finding interesting and different things to be doing is what's going to lead to the next breakthrough, the next methodology, the next book, the next training. All of that is, I think, available. And so like I said, like I'm curious. I'm like to learn and like to discover what I don't know. I mean, I love somebody pointing out to me. I'll tell you one quick story, Linda. That we were working at Mobile, and we had our change effort, right? We had it mapped out. We were following it, and I said one of the things that was interesting is I said there were all these spin-off initiatives happening. I mean, which is good. It's like organically work was being done and changes were being made, and it was off the roadmap of our, actual change effort. And a fellow named Charles Bennett from Louisiana said to me, he said, and this is, a bad interpretation of his accent, but I'll give it a try. He said, Jake, uh, what you call spin-off initiatives, we call work.
Aha. That's great. That's great. So it's do what is needed, do what shows up, go after, but it also requires paying attention to what's showing up, paying attention
Absolutely.
to what's being called forth. That's great. That's great. I see you operating your life like that. Being able
Thank
to
you so
name
much.
something, describe something, communicate it to others. You're very gifted that way.
Thank you so much. Well, this is a great opportunity. You've got great questions, and I think that the podcast, it's just a tremendous addition, right? I mean, it's just another medium, and you moved into it and moved forward with it, and whatever the technical challenges may be damned. Full
Right.
steam ahead.
Go for it. Absolutely. Jake, any last thoughts, any last wishes for our audience from you today?
I think that the thought that I would leave, Kathy used to say, leave something ringing in people's ears, and I think that what I would leave ringing in your ears is you can do it. That having that affirmation, having that confidence, and you know what? If it doesn't work exactly the way that you wanted or thought, that's okay. What did I learn? How am I moving in the right direction, right? That sailboat that's tacking back and forth. Am I moving in the general direction? Because it's unlikely you're going to get there in a straight line. It just the probabilities are not on your side. So the question becomes, what am I doing to learn and progress? And if I'm learning and progressing in anything that I'm doing in my life, Godspeed. I'm going to be in better shape, and my organizations, my clients, all are going to benefit from that. So I think really keeping that optimistic perspective that I talked about early on is something that's critical in this world of change.
Absolutely. What a blessing to have this conversation with you today, Jake. It just light up my life. Keep on cooking, keep on consulting, keep on figuring it all out for us. Thank you so much. Today's subject is one of the key topics that we feature in our Leading Transformational Change online program. If you'd like to learn more about leading transformational change, go to beingfirst.com/LTC. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I hope you gained some valuable insights for your work. Please send me your questions and challenges by going to askdrchange.com.